Welcome, 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 welcome,
Welcome, welcome, welcome, welcome,
welcome, welcome to the Rum. Hey, everybody, we are super excited. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of To the Rum. Since we're no longer doing the impromptu jingle, you guys, it's a little bit of a slower burn, but thanks everybody for tuning in. Constantine, we have just under 300 subscribers now. Can you believe it? I can.
That is amazing.
And you
Love
can
it.
find us. Where can you find us, Constantine?
You can find us on Apple Podcast, on Spotify, on Stitcher, on Amazon Music, and wherever you get your podcasts, except Google Podcasts because they don't exist anymore.
Yeah, they moved it all over to YouTube, which I fixed the doohickey. That's my catch-all word now. For some reason, it's sending the audio to our YouTube channel, but it's auto setting it to private. So I just have to go when it sends and make it public so people can listen. But
okay, yeah, we are on YouTube. I always forget that one. We are on
YouTube because they basically retired that. Well, Constantine, let's kick off. I'm always the one kicking off with the updates. What about you? And then I'll go.
Yeah. So not a whole lot of updates from us this time. We've had some things going on with the distillery, a lot of just admin process, things like that if I talk to you, it would just bore you to tears. We do have the Fiji Rum and Tiki Festival coming up in September 2025. So we'd love to see people come out for that. More information coming on that soon. I know I keep promising more, but we do have some updates coming probably within the next 3 weeks. We'll have dates set for that. And the issue with that is, when you're doing an event in a far-flung place like Fiji, just way down here in the middle of nowhere, we're trying to align it with a couple of other events in the region, so people will have an excuse to say, okay, well, I'm already in Sydney, I may as well make the jump over to Fiji. And it's more them making the case probably to their finance people in terms of the big brands and things like that. So we'll have more on that, but it will be September, will be 2025, and it is happening. How about you, Brian? What have you been up to? Just keeping up with you is a job in itself. So tell us what you've been doing since we last talked.
Quick cliff notes. Oh man, say that 10 times fast. I don't even think we get to talk about when I went to Guyana. So it was cool. I got to go down, hang out with folks at DDL. Conceptually, seeing hear about the three wooden stills, but when you see them, it's absolutely a completely different ball game. It's really cool hanging out with Sean Caleb. That man knows a lot about rum. Apart from that, events galore everywhere. Check out the rumcuriousclub.com. And upcoming a week from tomorrow is actually going to be the downtown Alameda Rum Stroll. So 500-person event on the little tiny island next to Oakland in the Bay Area, 500 people there. And I'm going to be doing a keynote with Justin from Kohana. And I'll be in the VIP section pouring the El Dorado new high ester blend along with the Barbancourt Haitian proof. I was hoping to get my hands on a bottle of the Barbancourt Cane Blossom, but more to come on that. Without all of the other things, because we can do other updates later, Constantine, we are beyond excited. We are thrilled. We are tickled. And we are truly excited to have two massive rum legends. We have
Giants.
Royalty. I had to roll my R's in the British style.
Royalty.
Just to have the pinnacle of rum bloggers, tasting experts. And I'm so excited, Constantine.
Yeah, absolutely. When I first started getting into rum and you start digging around online to see what's out there, and this was maybe before you have all the stuff there is today, but you just couldn't get very far without tripping over the Fat Rum Pirate website and just doing deep dives onto that. And that was sort of mind-blowing for me, again, because you get into rum and it 2016, 2017, before it blew up on the internet, there just wasn't a lot out there. So we've got Wes Bergen, the man behind the Fat Rum Pirate, one of the largest online review platforms there is. So I think the number that I got was 800, over 800 to date. I don't know how accurate that is, but I know he's been on here since 2014 doing straight takes on rum. Whether it's brutal, whether it's great, he will let you know, just like the go-to source for rum nerds everywhere.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
Yes.
I don't know, Wes. It looked like you wanted to chime in for a second, so I wanted to.
Maybe it was. Is it over 800, Wes?
It's probably close to 1,000 now, I would say.
Mm.
I've slacked off the last couple of years just to let Lance kind of try and catch up with it. But I think
Thank you.
I think we're both probably knocking around about that. I know Lance he updates how many he's done, but I don't. So I'm not sure how many I've done, and I've tried looking at it, but I've got articles and stuff as well. So but I think it's about 1,000, and probably tried about another 3 or 4,000 as well on top of that as well. It's ridiculous.
It's funny. I think people fall into two categories, and we have both of us the four on here now. We two fall on each side, right? Brian, who meticulously keeps track of every rum and how many, and I think Lance does that as well. And me and Wes, I've tasted some I haven't. I don't keep track. I think if you keep track, you're a maniac. I think that's true.
I think I'd probably
Yeah.
be dead if I tried that.
Why would I not? You know why I keep meticulous notes is I'm keeping them for several reasons, but especially when I run into Eric Kay at the San Francisco tasting
Yeah.
lot, and he's like, "Oh yeah, have you tasted blah blah blah?" And I'm like, "Well, Eric, let me look at my handy dandy notebook here. And yes, I was getting plums and apricots and stone fruits and oak and blah blah blah." So, and also I just want to remember if it was something memorable or if it was, well, I feel that everybody on this call, if we've had something that was really, really bad, it's hard to forget. And have
Mm.
PTSD. But yeah, I mean, Wes, it's just awesome to have you because, UK Rum Club on Facebook, and that's been going for a long time. So we're really excited to hear about your journey. And who else do we have? You know him as the Lone Caner, but who else, Constantine?
We have Lance Turridgebody, who's the founder of the Lone Caner, another site that you just can't avoid if you're really into rum, and especially in that stage where you're just trying to find out what's out there. And rum, the problem we have with rum is a lot of it's not accessible to all of us. You live in somewhere. I mean, Fiji is a great example, but parts of the U.S., even friends of mine that are in different parts of the U.K., you can't get everything everywhere. So you have to sort of go on these sites and sit and to imagine what everyone's talking about. And Lance really breaks that down. It's almost as if you tried it yourself when you read these notes. He talks about the history, the culture, craftsmanship, where it came from. But the reputation of both of the guests today in this world of rum tasting and just getting the word out and letting us see how diverse the world of rum is.
Yeah, absolutely. And well, I guess first and foremost, Wes, Lance, thanks for being here.
Oh, it's good to be here. No bother.
Super exciting. So, as far as formatting, what our listeners can expect is we're going to dive into both of our lovely guests' backgrounds, how they got into rum. And then for me, I am equally excited, as I'm sure everybody else listening is, because the subject of experiencing rum, nosing rum, tasting rum, for as many events that I do, the number one question I get is, yeah, so how am I supposed to be sipping? What am I supposed to be looking for? Or some variation from that. I didn't mean to sound like the Martian character from Looney Tunes, but there's all this trepidation when it comes to people wanting to taste things. And even in the beginning of my journey, I wouldn't buy a bottle unless I had looked at both of your reviews. And if it was utter garbage, it was like, all right, I'm just going to leave this one here. And even because of both of you, all the reviews of Foursquare, when I first was getting into things, I was very much, oh my God, $90 for a bottle of rum? Are you kidding me? But just seeing, oh, this is exceptional stuff. I'm like, all right, I guess I'll buy it. And so you guys, first and foremost, from myself, on behalf of our listeners, thanks for giving us all the rich context, but also for me, especially giving me in the earliest days and even to this day, buying confidence in pulling the trigger on a bottle that, I might not be able to try. It's not available. So I got to pay for premium shipping from Rum Auctioneer, which I spent way too much money on, but we're not going down that rabbit hole. So before we get started, though, guys, what we like to do is a bit of a show and tell or a drink and tell. So, Constantine, I know it's 7 a.m, but do you have a little dram of something?
I don't this morning. I haven't been getting enough sleep lately. Had a lot of stuff going on. So this morning I am just, I should have this in an IV, but this is coffee from the South Pacific Coffee Company, which is this particular blend is all local Fijian grown coffee. So really nice. You can only get it in Fiji. And if you come next year to the Rum and Tiki Festival, you can get a bag to go home with you.
I love it. Well, Wes, are you enjoying a bit of rum?
I am. I'll show you the glass. So there's the glass.
Ooh.
But I've also picked a bottle which I think might pique a bit of interest with Lance. He might remember this one. If I can get that right.
Hamden.
So it's the only time me and Lance have actually met in person.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. I remember that one.
Nice.
Yes, the original Hampton. The issue.
So
Oh, wow.
I thought I would finally finish that one off as a kind, because I knew we were coming on tonight, and I thought when I saw the show and tell on the agenda, I thought that would be a good one to try and
Ooh,
finish off.
I
What
love
are you
it.
having, Lance?
Oh, well, actually, I'm in the office. I'm not actually at home. So that's kind of limits my options. But I was in the office at 5 o'clock this morning, and I was just putting the finishing touches on a review I was writing for a Bayou XO, which I wasn't very impressed by.
I saw that.
And so I actually have that in the office. But because my office has glass doors and windows, I'm afraid I just can't show anybody anything. So that's what I have in the corner of my office, but I'm not drinking it right now.
Wow.
Understood.
No, you're absorbing it through osmosis. Well, Wes, it's just you and I. So I got this bottle sent to me. It's a new independent bottler. They're called Great Shearwater Rum. It's a 14-year-old Trini rum from TDL. And I got to say, everybody on this call, I'm sure, has experienced this, but rum continues to surprise me because the bottler that sent this to me said, oh, this is a perfect entry for bourbon lovers. And they're in Indiana, I think, maybe the Carolinas, something like that. And I went, I have yet to have a Trini. My mind always goes to like punchy, bold TDL, and I do have to say that this one is probably the most bourbon tasting Trini rum, like Trini light, if I will. So that's what I'm enjoying. 58% unadulterated, and cheers, everybody.
Cheers. Cheers with my coffee.
And cheers with my coffee. And so before we jump into the main topics, though, I think it would be great to hear from our guests. Wes, Lance, I mean, you both have built such amazing platforms. You have developed such a following and respect from brands, enthusiasts, even people that are getting a little bit rum curious. And so everybody continues to look to you guys for advice. So hearing from you, how did each of you get started? Lance, do you want to kick us off?
Actually, I'm very different to Wes, because I know Wes started off as pretty much like he was tasting some stuff that he was reading some things about, and then he completely disagreed, and he did it as pretty much as a consumer service. But for me, it was different in that I started becoming a member of a book club that everybody was bringing their whiskeys to, and because I don't particularly care for whiskeys that much, I know enough about it, I just don't care for them that much. I started bringing rums when it was my turn, and suddenly the founder, a guy called Kurt Robinson, he said, well, why don't we start a website? And I said, yeah, that's a good idea. And then eventually we just split it off, him into his, me into mine. And I've been writing since about 2009, but the site itself didn't start until March of 2013. And I just kept going from there. But rum for me goes back a really long way, because I actually grew up in Guyana, even though I wasn't born there. And as a consequence, as a teenager and a young man, that's pretty much all I drank, because DDL actually does make a lot of whiskeys and vodkas and God knows what else, but most of it is utter crap. But the rums were good, even in those days. And of course, Banks DIH is the other blender over there that makes rums from time to time. So it was always there in my background. So it was no stretch whatsoever to get into that aspect of things when I started doing this kind of thing more seriously and starting to write. But for me, writing and explaining things was something that I enjoyed doing, because there was so little information out there, aside from a few books. As you pointed out earlier, there really wasn't that much information out there. And what there wasn't all that informative. It was, people were just kind of like either talking about their collections or whatever they've been gifted by somebody. And that wasn't enough for me. So it just started and it grew legs, and it's just like on and on and on and on. And suddenly, I'm at this stage in this thing where it's taken over my life, but that's pretty much it.
Oh, it's great. Well, now the next iteration, and for anybody who's unaware, you got to check out the Lone Caner on YouTube and Instagram now, because Lance, you're starting to do video reviews, which are absolutely kick-ass. So I had my hat on, I took it off, but I'm putting it on to give you a hats off to you. Wes, what about you?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of getting started with rum, indigestion which sounds mad and heartburn, because basically until I was about 30, I used to just drink, kind of like go around the bars drinking pints of lager, which I never really liked. And I used to drink a lot of cider. So I'd got into cider quite a bit. And then there was a lot of like flavored cider in England. So I was drinking that, but I was just getting such terrible heartburn from it that I had to stop drinking it. Basically, I couldn't drink it anymore. So I had to look for. I still wanted to get drunk, so I had to. I still wanted to. Sorry, I still wanted to enjoy alcohol responsibly. So I had to go and look for something else to drink. So and my wife drank vodka, so I thought, well, I'll try a bit vodka, and it's just boring. So
Yeah.
I remember I was just a bit bored of it, and I'd always kind of enjoyed a little bit of Bacardi every now and then, and going out and having a Bacardi, but not really knowing that Bacardi was rum, or really having much idea of it. So bought the odd bottle of Bacardi from like duty free when you went on holiday, and it would last like months, but never really drank that much. And then we went away on holiday. We went to Medina in Spain and stayed in a villa basically in the middle of nowhere, really. And went down this local little, cash and carry mom and pop shop, I think you was called them, just a little off license. And they had bottles of dark rum for €4. And it was Bardenay Negrita, which is quite a historic brand. I'm not going to say it's the greatest brand of all time, but I thought, I like is Bacardi white rum, and this is dark rum. I'll give that a try. And over the course of the next week, me and my father-in-law drank about 6 bottles of it. And I kind of thought, I quite like this. Came back and started like looking at like, what is dark rum? I was like, well, what's the difference between white rum and dark rum, stuff like that. And I remember the first point, I remember spending nearly £25. I nearly had a fit on buying a bottle of Chairman's Reserve, which I had to pay £4 postage and packaging. I mean, it was just outrageous, really. And I thought, no, I want to know if it's any good. And then I got that, and I thought it was great. And I went on and on about it to my wife about how great it was. And then that Christmas, she bought us a bottle of get your words out, Wes. Admiral Rodney, an Elements 8, which was like an English release, but it was a Vendome still St. Lucian.
Oh, that was St. Lucia Distillers.
Yeah, it was out for a while, and they brought some other rums out since then. It was really good. And I can't remember what the other one I got was. It might just be another bottle of Chairman's, but anyway, and that was me kind of like, I've got to find out more about it. And then you just go down the rabbit hole. And once you start going down the rabbit hole of rum,
oh yeah,
it's the biggest rabbit hole you'll ever find.
Oh my God.
We all experience this, to some degree or another. I mean, the 4 of us here, a lot of our guests, it's like you just start. And then, I mean, Brian, when I met you, you had a tech job, you were doing all kind of things. And now like, it's all you do. Me, I was doing something else, and I quit my career and now going to make rum, and it sucks you in a way that a lot of things don't. And
responsibly, of course, or
responsibly,
maybe
yes. Sucks you into a world of responsibly enjoying things.
Yeah, like I said, I mean, now it's to the point of I spent way too much money from Rum Auctioneer, but I needed the Velier old vatted Navy rum. So I got the first edition, which I've been hunting for forever. It's the first time I won something on Rum Auctioneer, and I'm like, oh my God, the shipping is how much?
Yeah.
I got such a good deal in this bottle.
How much did you pay for that? How much did you pay
so I got the first and the second edition, and it was like, I don't know, €300 for both. So I'm thinking, hell to the yeah, baby. And then I get slapped with 104. No, it was pounds actually. So 140 pounds shipping plus the commission fee. And I ended up being like $600 US. And I'm like, so I guess I didn't really save money when I think I was going to get this really good deal. But you know what? I needed it. And, when you get those inklings of things that you need, I got to get better though, because I have 650 bottles now. And it's a problem. I'm like stashing them in my closet above my clothes. Like it's taken over everything. I'm just going to make like
Are you hiding them because you're drinking them? It's they're half drunk. Are they?
No. So the thing is, Wes, like if ever you come to LA, if please come to LA, most of my bottles are like Most of them are like this because I truly just want to sip, and now I'm just on a quest to try as many other things. So, Wes, Lance, you have an open invite to come to my house. You've probably tasted most of the things that I have. But when you say St. Lucia and St. Lucia Distillers and Chairman's Reserve, I don't know if you guys have the Ed Hamilton single pot stills from way back when, but I have all of them except the 5 year. So we'll have a rip roaring good time. And, Wes, we can responsibly finish 6 bottles between the three of us.
I'm sure I can.
But I love it. And so, Lance, I mean, shifting to you, Lone Caner, it's so just very informative on so many different levels, not only from the tasting perspective and the approach, but giving such background, I know, in written format and now in video. And so, I guess what kind of started there or prompted you to say, hey, it's time to iterate and start doing video as well?
The two are actually extremely separate. For the first point, I write the stuff that I'm not getting. And this is actually advice that I give to a lot of people who come to me saying, well, how do I start doing this for myself? And I say, well, write the reviews that you yourself want to read and put in all the information that you are not getting that you think other people might want or that you yourself want but aren't getting. Because, and I take you back to 2009. At that point, there was Matt Roble, there was the Rum Dude, there was El Machete, there was Chip Dykstra. He had just started up in the north. There were a few guys out there, and the Burr brothers, of course, were much bigger then than they are now. But the fact of the matter is that everything you were getting was so summarized that you never really got a lot of information, and most of it was contradictory. So there was no source that you could go to. The internet was, of course, not quite as good as it is now, where you can Google just about everything and find the info you want. So even though my reviews were at the beginning rather short, I tried to tell the story of what the background of the rum was, whether it was the country itself, whether it was the distillery itself, if it was an independent bottler. Those were not all that common back then, but there were a few. I wanted to talk about that. And gradually, I realized that people wanted to know this stuff, and I kept getting questions via emails and whatever as to, well, okay, can you tell us something about the still? Can you tell us how old it is? Is there anything dodgy about this and that and the other, which blew up around 2014 or thereabouts? So that's what led to the evolution of my writing to become longer and longer, in point of fact. In point of fact, now I've written so much that I don't actually have to put all that extraneous detail anymore. I simply say link to the following, and there you go. But this is what led to me putting all sorts of other articles out there that are more informative than anything else. And of course, Matt Petrick is the guy who has taken that to a whole completely different level, because that's all he focuses on, and not the reviews. Well, I try to kind of be a bit more holistic about the whole thing. But in terms of the videos, that was two things happening at the same time, and that both of them happened this year. One was I was getting really dissatisfied with the level of engagement that I was getting. I was putting out 1 to 2 reviews a week as best as I could, and yet, you got an uptake of site visits and people read it, and then nothing happened. And I had no idea what people were thinking or what they were saying. Even on the shared Facebook clubs, nothing was going on there. It was sort of, you get a couple of likes and then it just drops out of sight forever, which is okay. But I live for the engagement because I want to hear what people have to say, whether they agree or disagree and so on. So it also became a lot easier to do these videos because the technology moved so far from the old YouTube days where you had to kind of you had to film something with a camera and then you had to edit it and you had to do sound work and all that shit. I don't have the time for all of this. I got 10,000 other things on my plate. So it became so much easier to do all this with just your telephone. And point of fact, that's exactly what I use my phone. I have a very good one, but that's what I use. And because I'm a photographer in my spare time, I have all the lighting set up and so on. So that part's easy. Microphone, no problem, but it's all done through the phone. So that became easier. But what kickstarted me was a friend of mine who I started to get very chummy with from another country who had moved to Europe. And he doesn't want his name used, so I can't use it. But he writes, he does these vlogs about his country, where he comes from. He's very much into the mountains and the whole experience of living in a different country and what are the new challenges there. And I realized that, he did only one take at a time, and it was always done with such love and such affection and such interest that you just could not help but follow along. And then I reached out, and he and I started talking, and we talked up to this morning, in point of fact, about the latest one that he did. And he gave me some advice and said, you know what, just get started. Just get started. It doesn't have to be, rocket science. Just put a small thing up there, put it 5 minutes or less or something like that, less if you want. Say what you have to say and get out. You don't have to do fancy editing and all of that. And I said, okay, let's give that a shot. And of course, the very first video that I did, I said, you know what? I never thought I'd be any good at this. And I just never thought it would be something that'd be interesting. But surprisingly enough, the very engagement that I was missing started to roll in like you would not believe. People started commenting, people started writing emails, people started saying things like, oh, wow, and it's clear to me now, in a way it wasn't before, that it's not that they don't like reading, but reading is a bit of a time suck, especially for stuff like mine, which is like, 800 words or so on. I can't write like Serge Valentin, 100 words and you're done. I just can't do that. But it does take time and effort. And of course, I see, Wes smiling here because he knows exactly what I'm talking about, and sometimes just people don't want to do it. They, if they can kind of like have a video and just see things going and somebody talks to them, then that's good enough for them. And Bob's your uncle. So I really enjoyed it. It's very quick to do. I can do it pretty much anywhere in a way I can't write. I can't write in the middle of nowhere, but I can film a video. And as a consequence, I've just tried to continue doing that. And so far, it's really held my interest. And I'm just going great guns with this one. So it's a great compliment to what I've already done. And that's also quite useful. So that's pretty much it.
Yeah, that the just get started advice is great for anyone, because what I find is on doing tasting and sort of trying to do critical tasting or things like that, it feels out of reach, I think, for people. And it certainly did for me, where you see someone do a tasting and I'm getting stewed plums and, brown sugar and the leftover skin of a banana from
tire in the
child's
sun for
lunchbox.
3 weeks. And it's like,
yes, right. And people are like, I don't get that. But you just have to, I think if you just do it, right, you just, you pick it up. I mean, like, Wes, let's hear from you. I mean, from starting out from this supermarket rum and Bacardi to getting to where you can do this, how did you go with that?
I think all you can do is, and I think, I made a bit of a joke there about how I got into rum. And I think trying to get from the point where you're drinking rum as a mixer to get to drinking it straight is the hardest part, without doubt. I mean,
yep.
It's not easy to, it's like when you first started drinking and you're having your pints of lager and your pints of cider. You don't like them. You like what they do, but you don't particularly like them. And then as you get a bit older, you start to appreciate, you like different drinks. But trying to drink something from drinking, like, say, a mixed Bacardi and Coke, to try and drink Bacardi neat, it's not going to be a pleasant experience. And right. It sounds awful, but something you've got to kind of persist with. If you're drinking, at the end of the day, you're drinking a spirit neat. So you've got to appreciate that it's going to burn, even at 40%, even the stupidest alcoholic of all time has got to accept that 40% alcohol is not, it's not something you can knock it back, but maybe that's a bit of a worry in itself. But you know what I mean? It's like, it's meant to burn. There's meant to be some booze there. It's meant to be boozy, and it's not meant to be easy. So the thing I would always say about when you're trying to get into like rum tasting is just be patient and have a rum and Coke on the side, have a little bit of like rum in the glass and try and taste it. But don't expect to get all these like flavors and aromas, and that takes a massive amount of time. And to be honest, the best thing I ever did, and I'll say this, when I first got into like tasting rum beyond with Coke, was to cheat and to look at the likes of Lance's website and everywhere else and say, what are they finding? What notes are there? Who's saying this and that? And it's not a bad thing to do, because people will, it basically everything you taste and everything you drink is based on your past experience. So what you can smell and taste is based on everything you've had before. So when you come into rum, if you're drinking a Barbados rum and you've got someone from Barbados who's telling you, oh, it tastes like, plantains and, stuff that's from that type of area, that should give you an idea of what you're looking for. And, it's a bit like a banana and, and things like that. I think that's the way, that's what you need to think about and just learn. And and just kind of appreciate, like, oh, I'm not getting it now, but in a couple of months' time I will. I think there's no quick way to do it. There's absolutely not. But it's at the same time, and one of the things that used to really annoy me when I first started doing like some tastings on Twitter, because they couldn't get many rum reviewers, they used to get a lot of whiskey reviewers. And I don't know, it's because there's so many whiskey reviewers that they just get so like complicated with their notes, and it's almost like, this is nothing like what I've got in my glass. They're talking about like, they just talk bollocks, and it's like, it's just because they're trying to stand out. Whereas I think in the rum world, I don't know if Lance agrees, but I think we can be more just straightforward with the tasting notes. At the end of the day, rum 99 times out of 100 is aged in bourbon barrels, so it's going to have that bourbon influence. It's going to have a vanilla taste. It's and a Jamaican rum is going to have a sort of like funk to it. A Barbados rum's going to be a bit more, refined, if you like, than a Jamaican rum. A Guyanan rum, you might expect to be sweeter. And it's just like learning and recognizing where the rum's coming from.
Yep.
And I do think a lot of things are overcomplicated by people who want to appear more intelligent than they actually are.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more. And I think the one thing I would just piggyback onto that is everybody's taste buds are completely different. So what I always try to say was,
exactly.
I might be getting butterscotch and you could get toffee and we could both get coffee, and or if you're not getting any of these things and you're getting something else, that is totally okay. I do have a quick anecdote.
I once got a email from someone who'd read a review that I'd done and a review that Steve James had done at Rum Diaries, saying, "Oh, you've reviewed the two different rums. You've reviewed the same rums, yet they sound like two totally different rums." And I was like, "Well, what kind of response do you want from us? Do you want me to say, oh yes, Steve was right, now I was wrong?" It's like, well, that's just what I've experienced. And you just think, well, what do you want?
Yeah, I mean, and the same thing, right? Like, so I love cilantro. I think Wes, you call it coriander. Is it coriander? That's what you call cilantro?
Cilantro? I've no idea. Is it green?
I know that, yeah, it's basically like a very pungent herb that's in a lot of Mexican food, etc. But I think it's called coriander there. Anyways, I absolutely love it, but my dad can't even stand the smell of it. And so the whole thing is, it's just, our tastes are vastly different. In a different life, when I worked at a winery, I'll get this story out because I really do enjoy this. And I usually try to stay away from, when I'm doing events, telling people what I taste, because I don't want to influence, but worked at a winery, was in the taste room, did bartending for weddings, and people would look at the tasting sheets, not realizing that those tasting sheets are one person's perspective. And so people would always ask when they come across whatever, Bordeaux, blah, blah, blah. How do they get the leather in there? And after, like, the for a while it was, oh, so that's the taste of the barrel. It's because it's charring, and that's just what people are perceiving when they get this. And everyone looked disappointed. So, because I was kind of a little fucker when I was younger, I finally one time went, well, I shouldn't tell you this, but we actually get strips of leather from Corinth. So we get some Corinthian leather. We get these leather shavings. We put them in the barrel. We rotate the barrel 3 times a day for 2 weeks. We fish it out. And that's how we get the leather flavor in there. And then the person yelled out, "Hey, do you know they're putting leather in the rum? Good Lord, in the wine." And then I got in trouble. I mean, so I always tend to try to stay away from telling people what they're tasting. But I do think that you're absolutely spot on. And to this day, I mean, every once in a while, I'll still go to your site, Wes, or yours, Lance, and just say, okay, this is something I've never had. And especially when I was getting into Mauritius rum for the first time, it's like, I don't have a baseline for even any of this. And so those guides are insanely helpful. But anyway, sorry to go down the ADHD rabbit hole of me being an interesting fellow when I was younger.
But
some advice
to the point, though, just to follow up on that a little bit, there are times, though, you have to be able to stand by something that is so obvious that you literally must say it out loud. And for example, the tar and fusel oil notes of the Coronis, or some of the koji notes of Japanese rums that are so strange to the Western palate. I don't do classes, and there's so few people here in Calgary who do this kind of thing that it's like searching for a needle in a haystack. But every now and then, you simply have to say, guys, this is what you're looking for. This is what you should be trying to see. Perhaps you may not, but at least this is a baseline that you could start with. And for Mauritius, for example, that's a good example too, right? But also for Fiji or Australia or the UK or anywhere else, there are certain markers of certain countries that you can point to and say that this is what is there. And I think it would be remiss if you don't point that out. They may not find it. And perhaps your palate is different from everybody else's, and what you interpret as this, they may see as something else. But it's still something that has to be done from time to time. You can't always say that the other guy doesn't see it, therefore he's wrong. No, it's just that their palates are different. That's all.
Yeah, 100%. And
that's what's great about those reviews, though, is it gives you like a framework, right? A frame of reference, I think, is the right thing. Where even if you're not getting that, at least you have a comparison, right? Or you can sort of get in the ballpark as you build your palate.
Yeah. And so I guess now is as good a time as any to really pivot in. And so I would love to hear from both of you guys on what is your process. For those who haven't seen, Lance put out an amazing video about just the different types of glassware to nose and to taste in. And I had never even considered that. And then I was sliding into Lance DMs going, oh my God, this is great. Thanks so much. I got to try all these different glasses now. But I mean, it's just, what is the process for you guys? And I'm assuming that it has evolved from when you first started to now. So whoever wants to kick off, but would love to hear kind of evolution and then how you go through the tasting experience, let's say.
Wes, go ahead.
I was going to say, Lance, I'll let you go first because I think yours is going to be more complicated than mine, and mine will be a bit simpler.
Okay. All right. Well, here's the thing. At the beginning, you're right when you said that there was development. There absolutely was. Because at the beginning, I used to do this on Friday evenings when my son was doing guitar lessons, and the husband of the guitar instructor was a rum guy. So he would sit with me, and we would kind of I would break out whatever bottle I had bought that week, and we would do that one rum, and then on Saturday morning I'd write the review. But as time went on, I started to do more and more at the same time, 2, 3, 4, 5. And of course, when I moved to the Middle East and I couldn't taste it all, I had to get out of the Middle East in order to do this. My whole system had to change because I was out in Germany for like 2 weeks. And in those 2 weeks, I had to try all the samples and bottles that I'd bought. So I started doing them in ranges of 6. 6 really works for me. 10 is too much. 2 is too little. I like the comparison of about 5 or 6 rums at the same time. So I always have this 5 or 6 glasses in front of me. And that is even the case now in Calgary, right, where I do it maybe once or twice a week. I have 5 or 6 rums in front of me. They could be anything. Sometimes they're Jamaicans, or sometimes they're all Mauritius, or sometimes they're Australians. But I do try to mix and match because I find that it's in the comparison that I find I get the most out of it. So I line up the glasses, I pour the shots, then I get the wife to mix up the glasses so that I don't know which is which. I number them all, so I know, I can go back and reference them, and then I basically just do them as blind as I can. I mean, I do know what's in the lineup. There's no avoiding that. And I spend about 2 hours just taking the notes and going backwards and forwards and backwards and forwards because it changes from the first minute to the 120th minute. And then it just stays in my book until I'm ready to write about it. And that's pretty much it. In a rum festival, I don't have that option, right? For the longest while, I had to go to rum festivals to get things because there was no other way to do it. So I learned how to do things very quickly. Which is to say, I would have 3 or 4 glasses in my hand. I would go up to a stall. I would ask them to pour, whichever 4 interested me, and then I would try those, and I would go off into a corner, and then I would spend another 5 minutes doing that. And that's pretty much all it is. But I do nose first, obviously, right? I spend my time with that. I do taste it. I go backwards and forwards and around and about a little bit, and I just make my notes, and I've got like books and books and books of nothing but notes. And then when I'm ready, I'll just transcribe whatever I feel like writing about on any given day within a certain level of variety. Because, I mean, I'm not going to write about an entire week of nothing but Isautier from Réunion, and I'm not going to do all Hampton all at once. I kind of mix it up because people do get bored, and I'd like to kind of like give them an idea. There's variety out there as well with whatever I do. So that's pretty much my process. Wes?
My process, I mean, to be honest, I'll get a bottle and I'll open it up, let it breathe, and pour a glass out, and then I'll, have a nose of it, a bit of a taste of it. If I'm totally sure about what I am, or I'm familiar with the type of rum that it is, then I'll usually write down some notes. To be honest, I'll pretty much write the review at the time. If it's something, and the more the more rums I've obviously reviewed, the less this happens. But if it's something I'm not that familiar with or I'm not that sure about, which might sound a bit odd, but sometimes you do kind of like taste a rum and you're not sure if you like it or not, or if you need another sitting with it, then I'll do that. But I don't use a particular type of glass or anything like that. Early on, when I first started trying to get used to drinking rum neat, there was a glass out called a neat glass, which things kind of disappear. Now, it seemed like a massive gimmick, but I got it and it had like a funny lip on it. And basically what it did, it took all the like fumes away so you could actually smell what was beneath the fumes. And anyone who hasn't tried it will still think, oh, where's he talking cack? But it did really work. And it took away a lot of the booze, but it allowed us to like notice a lot of things that I wouldn't have noticed before. And I don't know what happened with that. I suspect it was just people was so skeptical about it. They kind of like it never took off because I haven't seen it for a while. But I used that a lot when I first started. But now I just tend to use a little copula glass, and any kind of Glencairn or anything, and just let it rest for a bit. But I think you just, and especially if you're not writing about it, just enjoy what's in your glass, and just, don't feel pressure to like be, oh, should I be getting this and should I be getting that? So, well, it's a very individual thing. So as long as you know what you're drinking and you know what you're enjoying, just enjoy it.
No, I love that. And you mentioned kind of letting it breathe. How long have you found that works for you, Wes? If you're cracking the bottle, is the bottle left for a couple minutes?
It just depends how thirsty I am, really.
The level of science on this show is maxing out with that comment, I think.
Oh no!
A couple of minutes. I mean, let it, breathe a couple of minutes, and then, depends how quickly you can walk back to your chair, I suppose.
Yeah,
no, that's fair. With your chairmans. Okay, sorry, I had to circle. God, I love chairmans.
Oh man.
Well, Lance, what about for you? I know that you did an amazing job talking about the different kinds of glasses that you have employed over the years. And so
that was a throwaway because it was just a random question I got, and then I kind of like said, "Shit, I got a lot of glasses here. Let's go through them and talk about it for a while." It was totally throwaway. Well, your question. Sorry, go ahead.
No. But I love how you give an amazing piece of content. You're like, it was kind of whatever. I don't know, whatever. But I mean, just to preface, there's so many different kinds of glasses. There was the neat glass, which is no longer around. There's the stem Glencairns. There's the larger kind of Glencairns, or not Glencairns, but there's the larger, longer stems that have a bigger opening, and then they have you have the distiller master blender, giant bubble with the very narrow. So with all the different kinds of glassware, and we don't need to go through each one, but I know that you have a very particular style of glass that you prefer now. So it'd be cool to just kind of hear your process on, I almost said wine. Good God. Do you let the rum breathe? And just kind of from the nosing aspect, what does that look like for you? And what glass do you like?
One of those Glencairns with a stem, the little tiny one that I introduced at the very last minute. I find that it works better for me. It could be a bigger one or a smaller one. That part doesn't matter. But what I do is I pour about an ounce. If I have a bottle, if I have a smaller sample, obviously it's less. The smaller the sample, the smaller the glass is really my rule of thumb. And then I cover it over for about 2, 3, 4 minutes and just let it kind of like, it opens up within the cover, so to speak, so that there's much more aroma. So the very first sniff you get is usually the very best one. And I would sniff that, cover it over, go to the second glass, third glass, fourth glass in line. And then I would go back to the first one. I actually don't start writing for the first 5 minutes because, again, I have to bring this point up. It's in the comparisons that you get the most subtle notes that you wouldn't normally get. And I know people have said that, it was like, what the fuck is he doing? He's just got so much stuff there. It's like, does he actually smell all this? Well, yeah, I wouldn't write it if I didn't.
Sure.
But the point I'm making is that I want to get rather more than less. And if that means taking a little bit more time with it, I rather would. And I find that as I get older, I find that the nose gets better, but the palate gets a bit more roughened. And I think that for younger people, it's the other way around, because I tend to get people arguing with me that they taste more, but they smell less. While with me, I smell so much better now with all this practice I've had, and ever since I quit smoking, for example, that I just get so much out of that a lot of that bleeds over into the palate as well. But for the most part, I spend a lot of my time on the nose. If I really like it, I spend more time with it. But sometimes it's just so straightforward and so simple that I don't really need to. And then I move a little bit more quickly. But pretty much that's all it is. I just go back and forth and I go back to it several times. I'm not there to drink. I actually drink much less now that I review as much as I do than I did before I started reviewing, when I just used to gun back the glass. Right.
Sure.
So as a consequence, I don't really mind spending 5 minutes on a nose and another 5 minutes tasting it 3, 4, 5 times, because I want to get it right, or at least as right as I can within the limits. Right. And that's pretty much all I do. It's not really rocket science. It's just being patient, really. And opening up, of course, does help, right? Because what you get in the first minute, 5 minutes later may change, or it may be a little bit different. A little bit of patience is really kind of nice. Doesn't always work, but if you have the time, then it's worth it.
Both of you do scoring on your tastings.
Yes.
I think, Wes, you only do a 1 to 5 scale with half a point in between. And Lance, you do the stars, but also a more detailed, I'm just popping one up,
100.
86 of 100. How do each of you approach the scoring, and tell us what does that mean for someone? If you have a 3-star, should someone just not bother? Or how should people interpret that?
Yeah, I mean, my scoring system, I basically nicked it off Dave Broom's seminal rum book. He did 1 to 5, and I thought I'll just do the same. So that's it. And 3's good, 2's average, 1's crap, 4's very good, 5's excellent. And then there's variations between that. I couldn't differentiate between 186 and 87. I just couldn't. It's not my way. It's not the type of person I am, and I just couldn't really do it. So I just thought that was easier for me. And I think it's easier for the consumer as well. It's like, if you're giving someone 4 stars out of 5, it's good. And I just like it. One of the things I really do hate is the 50 to 100 wine scale that's been adopted. So you've seen things that are getting 75, 80, and really they're just getting just above average. And 75 to 80 just doesn't equate to average to me, but that's just my opinion.
Yeah.
It's weird that you mentioned that, because last week I put out a video essay on scoring. And I mentioned this. I absolutely agree with you on this one, Wes. And one of the things I like about Wes' system with the 5 stars, or it's really a 10-point scale, but whatever.
Yeah.
What I really like about it, Wes, is that you use the whole bloody scale from 0 right through to 5.
Yeah.
No, I'm serious. It's one of the best things, because one thing I noticed, and what I said out loud, is that the weakness of any scale that's as detailed as 0 to 100 or 50 to 100 or whatever is that, it's like, how on earth does anybody actually understand the minutiae of a 1-point difference? That's a very good point you made there. But the other thing is that people tend to score from the middle upwards, and the bottom half is completely ignored. So I find that even in my own work, that, my midpoint is 75. So something that's 75 is a completely average rum. So like the Bayou that I was talking about earlier, I scored it 74 this morning because I didn't think it was that great a rum, and I deducted 1 point just to express my displeasure, so to speak, right? But I actually don't score very much between 50 and 60 or 60 to 70 because, I don't find that many dogs, although I do look for them, but it just doesn't work out that way. And it's incredibly annoying, which is one reason I eventually stratified that into the star system as well, in a half-assed effort to equate the point bands of 50 to 55, 55 to 60, and so on, all the way up to 95 to 100 into 1 through 5 stars, and that's the best I could come up with, short of redoing everything. And I've got 1,000+ reviews there. I don't have the time for this anymore. I had to rebuild the site a few years ago. I don't want to do this.
So anymore. Lance, did you decide that my scoring system was the best then?
Let's just say that your score has advantages over mine, but I'm so used to mine by now that I just don't feel like changing it. So there you go.
I'll take that as a victory.
Yes, please do. I mean, certainly it's got... And actually, a lot of people came back to me on this and said, they love Wes's system and they absolutely find it easy to score. It's visual, it's interesting, it's quick to understand. What's with this 85, 86 bullshit? And I can't say they're wrong. It works for me, but that doesn't mean it works for everybody. So, you got this one, buddy.
I'm always right, Lance. I'm always right.
Except when, I thought I made a mistake once, but I was wrong.
I didn't. It was someone else's fault.
Mm.
Well, and speaking of scoring systems, I would love to know from you guys, what's the absolute worst rum that you have from a scoring perspective, and then juxtaposed with the best, if you had to pick? Because, I know that you both have some very, very highly reviewed rums out there, but is there for both of you an unequivocal, this is the worst thing I've ever put in my mouth, and should be a biohazard for anybody else to try, like avoid at all costs?
Wow. Well, I will have one. I'm disappointed I can't think of one straight off the top of my
I was
head.
hoping for like eye-twitching PTSD of, guys, whatever you do.
Well, for me, I've got two just off the top of my head. One of them was the Japanese Seven Seas rum. And I actually couldn't score it because it was so different and so, filthy compared to anything else that I had ever been labeled a rum that crossed my path. I just refused to score it because it made no sense to try. It was different from, anything that I'd ever done before. So, but I really hated it. I would not willingly go back to that rum. The other one is the Pirates, which is, there's two versions of it. There's the standard Pirates XO, and then there's the Cask 23 or 1623. And both of these label themselves as, premium rums. The Pirates XO, I think, went for about $50 Canadian, and the 1623 went for 200. And both of them were so absolutely dosed with vanilla and orange essence of some kind that they would never pass muster in today's world. I wrote a screed about both of them, and I just absolutely despise them for pretending to be something they were not. But those are the only two that come up to my mind, with one exception, and that was a spoof review I did of the Caputo 1973, which I scored -50. But that was like a April 1st joke. Oh yeah, you got to read that one, as well as the history of the Heisenberg distillery, which is another spoof that nobody seems to understand was a spoof. But okay, I had fun writing it. So.
Yeah, I think I'll come back to the rum I hate the most will have to be Teresa. Anything they put out is just absolute the worst trash. It's just horrible. The Navy rum is, and it's meant to be something like 15 to 20-year-old Guyanan rum. It just tastes, it's horrible. It's the worst. It's up there with Millionaro, and I think I've got a list of the 10 worst rums in the
Yes, you did. You put that. You reprinted that just the other day.
Yeah, well, I revised it. It wasn't revised that much because what's still shit 10 years later, but not worry.
So is it, you talked about the additives and the orange and all the vanilla stuff being put in it. Is there, I think that's one category of worst rums, but what about just an unadulterated producer that's actually trying and produces something that's shit? Do you have anything that pops into your head that's that?
Oh, Christ. Wow. Oh, God.
Yeah, I got to look at my list here. Damn, that's a hard question.
I think you'd have to go, and again, it's not a case of are they unadulterated. I think the stuff from India, I don't even think some of it is rum. McDowell's rum, Old Monk, it's labelled as rum, but is it really rum? And it does pass a lot of hydrometer tests, and is the additives there? But I don't think I wouldn't say there's an actual producer that, just puts, distills molasses and then puts it in a barrel, and then it turns out truly, truly atrocious. Nothing like what this, by the time you've added all your sugar syrup and God knows what other crap you want to put in it.
Well, there are some Eastern European things that call themselves rums, but they really are. You know those, right? Like the Marowska that you reviewed, and a couple of the others from like the Battle Domaci or the Casino 50 Degrees. These things are neutral alcohol plus spices, which is a tradition there dating back from the 1800s. But now they've had to change it because of the EU regulations. So thank God they don't call it rum anymore.
It's called Room.
Yes.
I had a lovely bottle of Room and a bottle of Branky the other week. When I was in Croatia, it was lovely. Absolute crap.
Well, and so I mean, we've touched on the additives piece and things like that. So I'm just curious to know from your standpoint a few things. I know that you both have discussed this in your reviews and such. Have you seen a push? Well, I guess two-part, or one is, have you seen a push for transparency from brands that are dosing? Not so much still. Okay.
Nope. I would say no. A lot of them are just gonna, if they can't adopt to the 20 grams per liter, they'll just label their rum as spirit drink, but very discreetly, so the people who would have bought it before would still buy it. The ones that are still coming as premium rum, I haven't noticed a fall off in sales of like Zaccaber and Diplomatico, which makes us think that maybe he's not using sugar so much, possibly stuff like glycerin and stuff, which won't be picked up by things like hydrometer tests. You'd need to be, paying for high-end laboratory tests to pick up those kind of additives. And again, because they can put them into the rums in such small dosages, the probably are compliant as well. So yes, the regulations have come in place, but again, I think the whole thing about the additives being totally about sugar have been totally misguided, because I don't think it ever really was entirely sugar. And everyone says, "Oh, these are sugar tests, hydrometer tests, sugar tests, 20 liters of sugar." We never got the information from the distillers, and we still are not getting the information from the distilleries as to what they're putting in. Like, I had a issue with English Harbour because I'd said they had 8 to 12 liters of grams per liter of additives in their rum, and they were like, "Oh no, we haven't. We don't add sugar." And I was like, "I'm not saying you adding sugar. What you add?" And then they told us about oak chips, and I was like, "Well, there's obviously something called." It's like, it's not for me to say what's like. I'm not the person distilling. I'm just saying I'm running these tests. There's something there. You come and tell me what it is. It's like, it's not for me. It's not for me, and it's not for the consumers to ask the questions. It's like for you to be honest.
Sure.
Yeah.
And then they're just kind of like, I never heard from them again.
That's been my experience as well. You can talk all you want, and you can do all the hydrometer tests, but there are ways around that, as you quite correctly point out. And as you also correctly say, people seem to think that when they hear XYZ grams per liter sugar, it's like somebody going with a like a shovel of and a sack of sugar in them, and he's actually pouring granules. No, it's nothing like
sugar.
Yeah, no, it's nothing like that at all. It's like El Dorado and that caramel thing that they did on the inside of their barrels, or others who who put wood chips into their stuff and so on. But the disclosure is still lacking, and it's actually good that we've gotten as far as we have. But by no means is this the end of the story. There's still so much further to go, and until we have some sort of labeling that emphasizes that and puts that front and center, or at least the back, in some way you can't miss it if you're looking for it, this is just going to go away eventually, and we just kind of like die of despair.
Well, I mean, I think it's just interesting that there's no nutritional information.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, it's on virtually everything else that we consume minus our booze. But El Dorado's a good example. I mean, I know that they changed the caramel coloring in the barrel or whatever, but the new formulas have changed pretty massively. As I mentioned, I went down, I got the 15-year Madeira cask. It's 43%, but it is very, very syrupy, juxtaposed to the new formula 12, 15, which are actually quite dry and highlight a lot of the blend of the wooden stills with the nice PM finish coming through. So are there other brands that you've seen that have changed formulas, so to speak? Not necessarily from a disclosure standpoint, from at least hearing what the most enthusiastic rum lovers are saying of, hey, like, at least be transparent, or let's cut down on the sweetness. Have you seen any other brands really? No? Okay.
Nope.
I think the El Dorado thing as well, I find the whole thing about them, they used to coat the barrels with caramel and then all of a sudden they didn't. Now, I'm not convinced by that at all. Because suddenly you're talking about a 12 and 15-year-old rum, and suddenly all of a sudden they've had all these other barrels that don't have this caramel dosage that are 12 to 15-year-old. It doesn't wash with me. Again, I think they know what they've been doing, and the whole caramel coating of the barrels, I think's bullshit.
That's a good point. I mean,
massively honest. I'm not even gonna. I'm not gonna sugarcoat it. Unlike the inside of the barrels, it's changed so quickly, and I know they've got loads of barrels, but then what have they done with all the other barrels? And it doesn't wash. Doesn't wash.
How much do you think your average consumer cares, though? I know people like us that are deep into it, yeah.
They don't, especially in the UK, and this is the most annoying thing about the whole thing is the fact. I mean, I've got a rum group, the UK Rum Club, got about 2,000 members. There's a rum club called the UK Rum Revolution. We've got about 12,000 members. You can guarantee, they'll get about 20, 30 posts a day. They're all about the Kraken, bumbu. It's bullshit.
Dead man's fingers. Which
and dead man's fingers.
We don't get here in the US.
Well,
we have that here.
I'm missing anything.
No,
we have a plethora of Captain Morgan, and my favorite are like the Cannonball Blast, pumpkin spice, apple tart, blah blah blah.
More tax dollars at work.
Oh my God. I did love Fred Minnick. I mean, and that's a good thing too, Wes, and sorry to interject, but I think all of us, the frustration that I have, and I'm sure all of us do, I'm speaking for all of us, so deal with it. But it's Spice Rum is still the number one category, number one seller, US, rest of world, UK. And it makes me sad, particularly because we have to deal with Captain Morgan, as we all know.
I think you're looking at this from the wrong perspective. And here's the thing: the conversation is happening, right? People are aware. People like Wes and myself and Ivar over in Toronto and Steve James when he was still writing and everybody else. We talk about this shit constantly. It's not that they don't know, it's that they know and they have chosen to do so, and that is their right to do. But at least they cannot say that, oh, I didn't know or I was misinformed. No, the information is all out there. And I pay particularly attention to Reddit because there's like 50,000 members on the RRUM subreddit, and the questions like that come up all the time. And you wouldn't believe it, but it comes up constantly. And people always say, yeah, no, I know that this is this. And yes, I do like this. So as long as your preferences are there, but you're aware of what you're drinking, this is Seal's Law, as I like to call it. Drink what you want, but know what you're drinking. And as long as that's the case, all hope is not lost. You'll never get people to stop because that's kind of like hardwired into us. But at least people are aware of what's going on. And if they choose to do so, well, you know what? We just can't educate everybody. It keeps the prices down for the rest of us, right? So that's the best we can do.
Oh, that's true. That is true, right?
That's fair.
At least we're not quite where the bourbon world is with the prices just going crazy. Yeah. So
I think it's the same across probably, at the end of the day, the spirits industry and the drink industry is like geared up to selling the cheapest shit you can for the cheapest price of the most people. And that is the way it is, and you've got your reps out there that'll rep for the brands and they'll see anything to, sell the stuff. And Spice Rum's not going to go away, but it's just frustrating when like I like rum. It's like, oh, have you tried lamb spice? Like, piss off, will you? It's like, bugger off. It's like, when you go to a rum festival, you need to go and like small companies say, you need to go and try that. They've got like hazelnut and mango flavored rum. I'm like, I really don't, pet. I'm sorry, like I didn't have to go over there and try that bollocks.
No,
Brian, I think you did the thing recently with was it Fireball?
Oh,
you're like whiskey. Have some Fireball.
Yeah, this was a video I did a while ago, but it's because I host a lot of events and do a lot of rum education here in California, particularly. And the piece that I don't even get is the people who are familiar with rum. They just think, oh, it's all Captain Morgan. So my go-to response is saying you don't like rum because you said you don't like Captain Morgan. It's like saying I don't like whiskey because I don't like Fireball. And here in California, there's so much education, and I feel the U.S. as a whole that is so lacking. But it's just defaulted because of the marketing dollars that Spice Rums. But again, to your point, Lance, and like if you like Captain Morgan, great. I'm focused on trying to get people to realize that there's more to this category than just broad brushing it as, oh, that's Spice Rum, or the Bacardi Ocho makes a really fine cocktail mixer, but the reps are pushing lime flavored Bacardi, for example. And so that's what people tend to think of when it comes to rum. And that's what makes me so sad. And so I don't know if there's ways around that. So I almost have to find like a bridge of, oh, captains, well, here's the Chairman's Reserve spiced rum. And then let's get you into maybe a Diplomatico and then a Florida Canyon, a Don Q, and then into Barbados and St. Lucia to Jamaica, blah, 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 blah. But even that takes so much time, right? Because who's going to realistically jump down this rabbit hole like we have? Not many people. So how do you try and get people to jump and bridge?
Well, here's one thing that I tend to mention to people who want to know why I take aim at this bland milk toast white nonsense that passes itself off as mixing rum, or low end stuff like the Bacardi Ambers or the lambs that dot the shelves of the LCBO in Toronto, or any sort of bottom feeder that just makes me get the hates. And what I tell them is that, you know what? It's because you drink this thing, you think this is the world. And then it makes you switch off of rum forever. And 40 years from now, when you realize that bourbon and whiskey are getting too expensive and you go back and you've got some disposable income and you actually can taste a Hampton or something from Australia or something from Japan and realize, holy crap, where has this been all my life? Well, it's always been there. But these bottom feeders drown it out to the point where you get nothing else and you think that's the world. No, it isn't. And that's the part that frustrates me. And this is why I don't like these cheap nonsense that everybody likes to pretend is the bee's knees.
No, and you make a good point, Wes. I mean, and for me, and I feel like for all of us, some days you feel like, yes, I'm making a difference. People are buying the Chairman's Reserve legacy after these events. And then for like months and months, it's just like, oh, I like this Kraken, blah, blah. And again, like, hey, if you like it, whatever. I'm not docking people, but it's just like, or I would never spend $50 on a bottle of rum. I'm like, I'm doing a barrel pick with Chairman's Reserve. It's going to hit shelves at this liquor store that does ship in San Diego. It's $60. It's 57%, a column pot still. And I know people are going to be like, $60 for a bottle of rum? That seems kind of high, don't you think? These notions that rum is just this cheap liquid. And I mean, obviously there's a lot of good rums to be had at a very affordable price. The Worthy Park Single Estate Reserve is $60 here in the US. I think that's very reasonable. But then it's just, anyways, don't get me started because I'll for 20 more minutes. And the other thing that you got to understand that everybody knows. But anyways, I mean, and so I know we've kind of gone all over the place. And so for both of you, we've talked about kind of the spectrum of all sorts of rums. And so advice from both of you for our listeners who are maybe just starting in rum, or maybe they're a big tiki person that is now wanting to maybe try to have a sipping rum and to experience. Do you have maybe a couple, maybe 2 to 3 starting quote unquote sipping rums that the average person would really enjoy?
Well, I don't answer that question directly any longer. I just point them to the key rums of the World Series and I say, go look there, pick anything, start. And that's pretty much all I got, because there's like 26 to 30. I forget how many it is now. It's quite a few. But it was specifically to answer that question. What do I start with and what are some good ones? That I started that whole essay series going, and I've never seen any reason to stop. So that's my go-to answer. You've got 27 choices there. Something's got to appeal. Try them all.
Yeah, I think if I was, if someone came to me and said, oh, I've kind of on a budget and I want to get into rum, what should I start looking for? I would say Chairman's Reserve. Maybe possibly Eldorado 8-year-old, Bottle of Pusses, Dawley's XO. I think what you need to look at is look for rums from, Jamaica, Barbados, Guyana, anything under 50 quid. Again, don't start looking for expensive stuff.
Yes.
Because you're not paying for better rum, you're paying for exclusivity, rarity. You can get any rum from any kind of respectable rum producing country. You could knock in a bottle of Havana Club 7, and get a good breadth for less than 50 quid easy. You don't need to be spending big money. And if you start spending big money, you will be disappointed. I'll guarantee it. because
Oh,
you'll
but
be
it's more
expecting.
than that. It's also that if you're starting to go almost starting at the top and working your way down instead of the other way
Yes.
around. And I disagree with
Mhm.
that, because if you start with the really good stuff, which is what a lot of drinkers now are beginning to do, then they would go back to the old stalwarts, as I like to call them, that have really are very good value for money, and they would say this is crap. Well, if you start at the top, where else is there to go but down?
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Start at the bottom and work your way up.
Plus,
Yeah.
the great thing about rum too is you can still do that affordably. Whereas if you get
Yes.
into some whiskey, I mean, you're just going to blow the budget right away.
Oh
There's so
God,
many
yeah.
more options for us.
Yeah. The only caveat where I tell people not to start, especially if, I've only ever tried, I'm not really a big spirits person. The last thing I'm going to do is tell them to buy the, $1,200 bottle of, Caroni 21-year-old, because that's just not a smart place to start under any circumstances. And when I tell people, it's just like you start with, if you're getting into the Scotch world, I don't drink Scotch anymore, obviously, but you start with Monkey Shoulder and you work your way towards like a Lagavulin or a Lafroig or an Ardbeg, right?
Yeah.
With 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 somebody that's looking to, buy bottles, do you guys have any thoughts on what people should be looking for on the labels? I know that transparency has been an issue, but I know we've looked at, rums from certain countries are always great safe places to start under a certain dollar amount. But just with so many different issues of 23-year-old, now it's number 23, and certain elements, are there things that you would advise people to look at and go, oh, okay, I better watch out for that? Or is it
Just,
just kind of
just,
paying
just
attention?
rate, just rate everything on it. A lot of people think Jack Daniels is 7-year-old. Says it all, really. Because there's a 7 on the bottle.
Yeah.
It is that simple. It's like just read it all. It's something I don't get with people. It's like everything I say, I read, and it's 23 Solera, so it's not. Is it 20? And just ask. Why isn't it saying it's 23 years old? If it's 23 Solera, why is it saying is this the youngest blend? And it just use your fucking brain.
Well, I mean, people do like to be spoon-fed, and
I know.
when you're in a hurry and you're going into a rum shop, that's the last thing you're paying attention, because a fair amount of purchases are for somebody else, not for you yourself. But I completely agree. I mean, you really have to read the label, because most of the time, 90% of what you're after is actually right there. It's the strength, it's the country of origin, where it's distilled, hopefully, or where it's bottled at the very least. And something, you take away the peg legs and the hats and the parrots and all that nonsense, you tend to get some fairly decent information if you're willing to look for it. And I think the lightning rod for me is always the number, right? And the words up to, as opposed to, a true age statement. And I just hate it when you get these weasel words like, every drop aged up to 40 years. Oh, for God's sake, give me a break with this nonsense, But you just have to pay attention. It's there in a lot of cases, you just in really tiny print kind of thing.
Yeah, very fair. Well, one other question then. I mean, Wes, you've talked about supermarket rums along with premium rums. Well, I guess we've touched on this, but yeah, I guess we've already touched on the budget rums. So I'm reading off of this little agenda here. I don't know. Is there anything else we need to cover? I feel like we've kind of gone through budget rums, what to look for. We've touched on additives. We've seen the evolution. Actually, are you guys interested in kind of what's going on with Jamaica's new GI? Where do you kind of see the world of rum going? Does the future look bright? Does it look about the same as far as just having a small select subset of really nerdy folks like us nerding out on rum? What does the future looking into the rum crystal ball look like for you guys?
I've kind of stopped paying attention to the argument about GIs ever since I realized that the GI for Barbados wasn't actually read by anybody who was commenting on it. And I thought that was really kind of ridiculous. Everybody's looking at the 2016 version when there's actually a more recent one that nobody's actually read. But in principle, I absolutely support 100% a strong GI. I love strong GIs. I mean, I've lived long enough in the third world to understand that if they don't put strong protections for themselves into place, then they will be taken advantage of, as of course we know the colonial model always has been. but it's harder than it looks. So, one of the things I wanted to write about, I wanted to actually do a quick commentary on the Jamaican GI that came out the other day, but I realized that other people were commenting on it already much better than I could, so I didn't bother. But the one thing that I wanted to mention is that it's a lot of irrational exuberance because, first of all, there's a 2-year window before it takes effect, and it doesn't actually change very much. And the one comment I really wanted to make was that it's one thing to say you can't use the words Jamaican rum if it isn't aged completely in Jamaica, which is really great, right? But there are all sorts of ways to get around that. And the labeling, it's just rife to be taken advantage of. For example, you could say it's a Jamaican rum or Jamaica rum without the N, depending on what the restriction is. Or you can say rum from Jamaica, very big title, with a very small rum from or something like that. There's always ways around this. So to me, the labeling part of it is the least of their problems. A good example is Ed Hamilton with his Demerara rum. He wasn't allowed to use the word Demerara rum in his thing. So what he did, on his label, he put really small writing, distilled on the banks of Demerara, so I mean, that's all people see. It's like the 23 all over again, so there's that. But at the end of the day, the real big issue is the reciprocity agreements. It's one thing to say that within your island, this is what you got. It's quite another to say that the EU will recognize it or the United States will recognize it or there is some kind, because you've got to give up something for that. Nobody's going to give it to you for free. You've got to then recognize Scotch whiskey or, Camembert cheese or some other nonsense like that. It's not for free. So there is going to be a quid pro quo, and we never hear about any of this. So, it's perhaps a little early to break out the bunting and say that the victory is won. No, there's still a long way to go before it's done. Right. But it's great first step, and I love to see it. I'm really happy that they've finally gotten themselves together. I'm waiting to see what happens with Barbados now.
Yeah, that negotiation too, I think, is one that people often don't think about, right? If you're a large market like, Brazil is becoming a big trading partner, and they have leverage to negotiate, for cachaça recognitions and things like that with others. But if you're a smaller country and you don't have much to give, you're not going to necessarily get that from, the TTB in the US or from, the EU or something.
Yep.
I mean, in terms of the EU, to be honest, when you look at some of the junk that comes in anywhere, like Old Monk and some of the other Indian rums, which probably aren't even rums anyway, and all the regulations they've got in place, you've got to ask how well is it getting monitored anyway, and I don't think it is at all. I think I could put something in the market tomorrow that's not rum, and no one would bat an eyelid. And I know from speaking to producers in the UK, you've got people producing rum from all kinds of different things, and like sugar cane, and it's not within the EU regs. But at the end of the day, as long as we're getting the tax money for it, no one gives a shite.
Yeah.
But you see, this is one reason why independent voices such as Wes and myself are so important, right? Because the producers have no incentive to really change. I mean, you've got the odd person like Richard or the Hussey family or the others who have a certain vested interest in making sure they produce the best damn thing they can, and they're absolutely upfront about what they do and why they do it and what it is that they're actually producing, right? But they're being drowned out by this dronish mass of mass market crap because, well, nobody else is taking an interest. So who else is going to do it? Let me put it to you this way. In all the years that I've been doing this, which is like about 15 years now, one time and one time only has anybody who isn't a member of the industry taken a series of samples and had them go through a laboratory test to check for things. And that was a French blogger called Cyril, yes. And nobody's ever done that, largely because it's too damn expensive for people like me and Wes. We got enough trouble buying the rums we want, let alone to have to put them through a goddamn test all the time.
Yeah, I think as well, Lance, I think it will cause too much trouble as well, which is another thing in the industry. It is very much a case of if you're in the industry, it's very much you scratch my back, and I'll scratch yours. And that's why I don't get too involved with producers and people who are in the industry. And Lance as well, I'm very much out of the industry. This is a hobby. I don't make any money from this. And that's why I can basically say whatever I can say whatever I want.
And you do.
And if I ever, Lance, I spend 40 hours a week at work having to do as I'm told. I'm not going to do it outside of my own in my own time. So yeah.
No, I
It
completely
doesn't
agree
help
with you
when you
there.
have how many millions of American tax dollars going to, a particular brand. I think that you
Mhm.
mentioned earlier, Brian.
Well, the
I think Matt
operating,
Dietrich did a piece
the
on that
estimated
recently.
operating costs of that net brand is,
Yeah.
by some estimates, $0, according to
They could dump everything down the drain and still make money, I think.
Well, and that also, that's going to get three
I wish they
billion
would.
with a B, billion dollars over 30 years. And when you're not paying any taxes, when your net operating cost is zero,
Yeah.
I mean, the joke is that you basically
Great
create
business
a rum that
model.
tastes like nothing, which is the most hilarious thing about all of this.
Yeah.
Given the future and seeing and hearing the, South Pacific distillers with Maison Ferrand having the first right of refusal on barrels,
Yeah.
with DDL no longer deciding to sell any barrels, minus a few brands that they have continual relationships with. From the future of rum, do you guys see that impacting independent bottlers? I mean,
Yes.
apart from having to look towards Asia and maybe go away from some of the traditional places that we've come to see from like a Holmes Key or a Velier, do you see that kind of changing, or other distilleries potentially stop selling their stock to a sheer or a main rum company?
Yeah, I can't see it happening in the short term. I mean, personally, I would love to see more of these distilleries actually getting the money for their what they're distilling and being able to age it and not having to sell it share.
Yeah.
As awful as that might sound, because historically that's the way it's always been. But at the end of the day, share do profit on what other people have produced, and you can argue about obviously that it's profitable for the distillery as well. Of course, it is. But you kind of wonder if they could just get a bit more of a reach. But then you look at the global, some of where these distilleries are, and unless they didn't have share there, there's no chance. There's been no chance of them really making much money. So, it's good to say the likes of Foursquare, where probably they're not that reliant now on share, but I bet you they do still sell a lot to share because it's bulk rum that, so I can see both sides of the argument with it, but I think, yes, you might want to move away from colonialism and, have everything where the distilleries are making all the money, but I think they do still need the traditional old, like big rum warehouse in Amsterdam and London to kind of keep them ticking over.
I mean, when you really come down to it, though, I don't think the indies are always going to find a way to get what they want, whether it is, the column still stuff. Like, for example, DDL isn't stopping bulk stills. What they're doing is they're not shipping heritage still stuff anymore. But the rest of the stuff, I mean, they've got 13 stills over there. Believe me, they've got an industrial column still. They can still send stuff over and call it diamond, and, the independents would buy it and take it. But what we're going to probably see is more smaller markets starting to come up. And we've seen this already. Like, for the last 2 years, Ecuador has been a big thing. Somebody, obviously shipped a couple of ISO containers of Ecuador rum over to Sheer, and suddenly all the Indies are getting it. Ghana is another one. The little Mim distillery that this Danish guy got kicked out of a few years ago, that's coming out the door. Now we're starting to see small craft distilleries out of India, whatever you might say about their production techniques. But slowly but surely, it is the emerging markets we got to pay attention to. Now, the freight costs and duties and taxes make that exorbitant, which is why we don't see very much from Australia. But you can see Killick, for example, this small little outfit in Queensland. They're starting to ship stuff, and people are saying, "Holy crap, where was this all this time? We only knew about Bundy or Bainley." Well, now there's more, and of course, there's tons of them that we don't know anything about. And all these small distilleries in Cambodia and Laos and Vietnam and Indonesia and Japan, man, there's potential out there. They don't have to go to the normal Caribbean or South American route all the time. There's options for everybody. So I think we're good that way.
No, I love it. I love it. I know that we're coming up just about the hour and a half mark, and Wes, I know it's a smidge late for you, so appreciate you burning the midnight oil. Constantine, is there anything else we want to cover before we go into wrap up mode?
No, I mean, I think we've done really good job just going through the whole gamut here of you guys' experience and how to get into this, and the best advice I think that Lance said early on is just do it. Just get started. Don't worry about whether you can taste all those things that you see, the stewed plums and whatnot. Guys, just get a glass. Doesn't matter what shape it is, whatever you got in the cupboard. I mean, we've moved, a couple times here lately, and ended up drinking rum out of just a coffee cup at one point, right? Because the other glasses were put away. And you know what? It was just as good as if it was in a Glencairn. So just do it, guys.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah.
Oh, well, fantastic. Well,
If I may just kind of like wrap up that part of things, I get asked two types of questions quite often. Which runs do I start with and how do I start writing? And my advice is the same to both people, right? First of all, start at the bottom, right? As we said earlier, just don't go with the exclusive stuff that everybody has available to you just because you have some disposable income. No, start at the bottom and work your way up. If you really want to do this, then get some experience. Read a lot. There is tons of information out there that literally didn't exist 15 years ago.
Yes.
Matt Dietrich's book is one of them. Dave Broom's book, Rum. There's even something as out of print and out of date as Rums of the Eastern Caribbean, which was done in 1997. It's still worth a read as a snapshot of time of what it was like back then. Taste a lot from everywhere. Don't be a snob. Don't be snooty. Taste everything so that you know what it is that you're tasting, because it's pointless to say that I don't like sugar or I don't like stuff from Fiji without having actually tasted a whole bunch of sugar or tasted a bunch of stuff from Fiji, right?
Don't say something's crap unless you've tried it. Never say something's crap. You haven't tried it.
And go to rum festivals. Absolutely go to rum festivals every chance you get. My God, there's like tons of them out there in every continent of the world. I mean, it's one of the reasons I started the list of the 2024 or 2023 rum festivals so that people would know where to go, right? And there's something going on all the time. I think the UK rum festivals, was it the last weekend, this weekend? I forget when it is, right? I had to miss this week. Yeah, well, there you go.
This weekend.
Start a club of your own in your neighborhood. This is a big thing in the United States, for example. All these little states or cities or whatever, they start these little things. The Calgary Rum Club has got all of 4 members, but we have a bang up time and we have some really good rums there. And above everything, don't surrender your own opinion. Have an opinion, but justify it, know why you have it. And that can only come with a little bit of experience. If you write 3 rums and then you have an opinion, I'd have to suggest that you need to broaden it just a slight bit. So that's really my advice here for anybody who's either starting to write or to starting to blog or to start to taste. You can't go wrong with a basic Caesar's pointers like that.
Absolutely. Well,
Great.
Lance, Wes, I mean, first and foremost, thanks for the time. It's been just so lovely to chat with you guys, hear your stories. Where can people learn more about you? I know that you guys have different presences, whether it's websites, Facebook. So, Wes, if people want to reach out to you or to get involved, where would they go?
Yeah, it's thefatrunpirate.com on Google. I'm on Facebook as well, and I'm on Instagram as well, though I didn't do much of that.
Fair. Lance?
I got my own website, thelonecaner.com, and that links to pretty much everything else, all my other presences. So there's TikTok, and the videos are all on TikTok, YouTube, and Instagram. Everything leads back to the site. But, the email will get me if somebody wants to. And of course, I'm on Facebook like everybody else is, so that'll find me. So, a simple search will turn me up.
Oh, love it. Constantine, what do we have next? Oh, yeah. So first, listeners, make sure to follow, make sure to engage. These two are experts and they know their shit. So listen to them. Yes. Constantine, what do we have next? For next week?
So next coming up, so we've done a couple of episodes on rum from places you may not expect or rums from unknown producers. We're going to continue on that vein and we're going to take a trip over to Ireland. Rums of Ireland. When Irish rums are smiling, you'll find Killowen and 4 distilleries on the show next. So a lot to look forward to there.
Awesome. Looking forward to it. And thanks, everybody. Thank you again to the guests. And we will see you all next time.
Thank you.
Thanks for everybody. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you. See you later.